What a treat to be on a platform with four colleagues who we've worked together with over many, many years. I think it's 18 years now, Donna in Barrydale, and then a little longer with our colleagues from Ukwanda Puppetry and Design Art Collective. In the days before this building was not even conceived, when they were working on the war horses and in Capricorn Park. So I'm going to introduce each of the speakers, but just to say the session is called "What is a Joint?" And it's not I mean, we're not handing out any joints here, and we're not also presuming that you know what a joint is. And we're also worried about the assumptions you make about joints. This is not the joint you're thinking about. It's partly drawn out of a way in which humanists have thought about the time being out of joint. And more recently, when we talk about the university as the joint being out of time. And so we thought, the one place in this building where joints are thought of very differently as not being out of joint, where the joint is absolutely necessary to think with and to articulate, it's in the work that we do in relation to two major projects. And the first, I'm going to welcome Donna Kota, who has joined us from Barrydale. For those of you who are not from Cape Town, Barrydale is about 3 hours, depending on how fast you drive. I do 3 hours. If you ask Heidi, it would take her 4.5 hours. Outside of Cape Town, it's a rural town. Donna will explain to us what's transpired there. But Donna is the director of a very, very powerful youth project called Net for Pret. In English, just for fun. And again, I'll leave it to Donna to explain what that name means and how it's come about. But it's an important project for us in many ways because it has allowed us to think about this question of youth mobilities in the post-apartheid and what it means to break out of the geographies of apartheid, that we've trapped young people in this country in the geographies of apartheid with very little room for maneuver. And what we've done in Barrydale over many years, in partnership with Handspring Puppet Company, who were the lead initiators of a project with Net for Pret many years ago, and then the CHR joined in on that project, was to figure out whether we could begin a process of learning to learn, of engaging the rural in a way that would teach us something about our own conundrums and conditions in the urban. And so this has been a project not where it's one of those projects where universities are not allowed to go in to tell Net for Pret or in any didactic way to instruct Net for Pret what they ought to be doing, but to use the occasion and the opportunity to learn. And it's an important ethical undertaking. It's part of our ways of thinking about what it might mean to build a post-apartheid sensibility and a representational politics that refuses the kind of speaking for as a condition. So Donna will go first, and then but I might as well, while I have the mic, and then I'll hand over to the four of you, is introduce you to the members of Ukwanda Puppetry and Design Art Collective, who some of you have met in the laboratory downstairs, known as the Laboratory of Kinetic Objects. And it is the place where we imagine many of the ways of thinking about what it means to bring the hand back into a relationship to thought in the humanities. So it's been an absolutely critical project. And, Ukwanda have been on a very, very profound journey. It's sometimes been a difficult journey, and I do want to mention the loss of one of our colleagues in 2017, Ncedile Daki, who was unfortunately and violently killed on the outskirts of Cape Town. And in many of the ways in which Ukwanda has proceeded with their work, they've kept together the memory of Ncedile as a very important part of this family that has emerged. So Sipho, Luyanda Nogodlwana, and Siphokazi Mpofu are the most important members, I want to say, of this wonderful undertaking in the Center for Humanities Research. They are part of Ukwanda Puppetry Design Art Collective. As you walk into this building, you will see a video installation of their most recent project, which is called The Herds, and they're going to be talking a little bit about that. And The Herds is a project that has undertaken a march of hundreds of life-size animal puppets together with a production company called The Walk Productions, Nizar Zouabe and David Lan in London, and together they've created this enigmatic project of a march over 20,000 kilometers of life-size animal puppets as an arts intervention on climate change. And so they are these days very difficult to pin down and very difficult to get into a room on a panel because they're very busy. And in fact, they're working on another project, the Bison Project, which is going to head off to New York soon. But I thought what we'll do for this session is allow Donna to go first to talk to us about her understanding of what is a joint and what that joining means for her in relation to the work done with Ukwanda, and then hand over to Sipho, Luya, and Siphokazi for elaboration.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donna Kouter, and I'm from an organization called Net for Pret, or just for fun in English. So when I heard the topic, a joint, I was thinking, I've never had a joint, so it it must be a puppet joint. So if I speak about Net for Pret, we've done performances and parades now for 18 years, but even before that. So we were having a regular Christmas tree with a brass band and a Father Christmas. And then on one night, Handspring um, Puppet Company, they joined this little Christmas tree performance. And as they say, the rest is history. After that, a 7-year partnership with Handspring Puppet Company. And then we met Ukwanda. I remember them being so young, so young. And yeah, we've been working together for quite some years. So um, I would say when I took over as the director of Net for Pret and also the director of the creative part, these guys were really, they were the parts of my joint. So for a joint to work, there has to be parts. And Ukwanda and CHR is part of that joint. And also my community. So it's a rural area, it's very divided. So the parade and performance really acts like a joining of two divided communities. So on that night, so normally it's a 1-day event. So on that night, the whole community would be there. So the parade and performance acts like a bridge joining the two communities. And on that night, it doesn't matter if you a billionaire, a millionaire, or even a farm worker. You sit there side by side in the audience and you enjoy what we've been working on for the whole year. And I would say that Ukwanda really, I earlier this morning I showed Luya some pictures of the work that the youngsters are busy with. And even from last year, we started building our own puppets. So the guys came up to Cape Town to train with Ukwanda. And then they went back and they built the puppets. So it was the first time that puppets were being built in Berrydale. Normally, the puppets would be built here, and then Ukwanda would escort the puppets down with a trailer, and so everything would come from Cape Town to Berrydale. So last year, we were privileged to train under Ukwanda, and we built our puppets for the first time. And so this year, we were thinking about the theme, and we said, the puppets were okay, but we need to step it up. And if you walk into our puppet department now, we even have a puppet department after all these years. So if you walk in there now, the transformation of the puppets between last year and this year is actually quite amazing. And these youngsters, they did not complete, or some of them did complete school, but some of them are out of school youth. So, and they've been training, as I said, mainly under Ukwanda. And really, we now have designers, we now have builders. So if I walk in there and if I want to know something about the puppet, they actually are teaching me how the puppets work. So Herman, that boy is a colleague of mine, and he's also trained with Ukwanda, and he brought a new kind of joint to Net for Pret. So now the puppet's legs, yes, it's moving, but it's moving in a way I've never seen before. So I've been working with Ukwanda also with the elephants. So I've been a puppeteer first before I became a director of the show. So I've been working with puppets and I've never seen that kind of joint. So I'm so excited for Herman because he's taken what he has learned from Ukwanda and in the lab. So he spent quite some time here. And now there's a new kind of joint. So you see, for instance, a little bokkie or an antelope. And it's kicking in a way I've never seen a puppet done before. So for me, if that's not growth, if that's not development and the power of joining with partners like all of these guys, then I don't know what we're doing. So I'm really so happy to be here and representing Net for Pret. And so if anyone ever wants to come down to Berrydale and experience a parade, you should come, really. So it's really there's a lot happening in the town itself. There's a lot of artists, but there there's another kind of vibe when you see youngsters who doesn't actually has formal training being transformed into artists. There's something else. There's this honesty. There's a realness, and you can't find it anywhere else than in Berrydale. So thank you.
Thanks, Donna. And I just want to also add, since we have colleagues from UVA, over several years, many of your theatre department, colleagues from the theatre department, when they arrived in Cape Town, we'd say to them, before you go see the penguins, you've got to go to Berrydale to do some work. And I know the late Steve, I forget Steve's last. Yes, that's right, Steve Muller, who passed away. No, no, not Steve Mull. Steve from the theatre. Stevens. Uh, anyway, colleague from the theatre department who had joined us. We're trying to recall his name. And then few others who had joined us over the years from the theatre department have all been to Berrydale and worked with Net for Pret. So thank you, Donna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sipho, as Premises introduced us already. So we are also going to talk about a joint, but in a puppetry world or in an object world. So what is a joint? So we sat with Ukwanda and we talked about a joint, and this is what we came out with as, yeah. So what is a joint? A joint is what allows movement to happen, whether it is a human being or an animal or a puppet. Movement is only possible because of a joint. Now let's think about a human body. Your shoulders, your elbows, your wrists, your hips, your knees, your ankles, and neck, they all have joints. So these joints allow you to walk, to run, to turn your head, and even to wave. So, or simply breathe naturally. It's all without joints, your body will be rigid or will be stiff and wouldn't be able to move. So the same principle applies to puppets. A puppet without a movement is just an object. We all know that. It only comes alive when a puppeteer gives it a movement. But for the puppeteer to create a believable movement, the puppet must have a well-designed joint. So a good joint doesn't just move, it moves accurately, and it has a correct range of motions, the correct resistance, and it behaves in a way that reflects the real animal or a character. So that is why as Ukwanda, before we build animals, all the time we go and spend time observing real animals. We study their anatomy, how their body connects, where they bend, and how they carry the weight, and how they move through space. So we are not simply making sculptures, we are designing a movement. So joint is a movement. So one of the most important things about joints is that movement creates life. So, and once there is life, there is a beginning of a story. We all know that. As the theater maker and a teacher has said, a movement is life. A story is a movement through space and time. So the moments puppet moves with intentions, the audience begins to believe it's alive. So I'll give you an example. So when we built a life-size leopard in Berrydale, as Donna just said, we built a life-size prototype. So the joints on the prototype worked correctly, beautifully. But later we enlarged it to a bigger puppet, create a giant puppet using the same joint system. So technically the joints were correct, but something felt wrong we realize that some animals lose natural quality when they enlarge too much. So their proportion and movement no longer no longer feel or believable. So designing joints, it's only about engineering. It's also about understanding scale, anatomy, and the nature of an animal. Now I would like to demonstrate with the puppet. So as I move this puppet, I'd like you to pay attention to the joints. Later we're going to show the video of the project that Premise was just said, the heads. So this leg prototype comes from that project. So this was a kudu leg. Speak about it, Mike. Sure. So because we're making a bison, as Premise have said, downstairs you'll see a bison if you're walking in there. So we are trying to sort of getting exact movement. So we adapted from the heads project. This is the kudu leg. So we wanted to make a bison leg. Ne? So if you notice the joint here is a little bit up, and the joint here is also a little bit up. So if you watch this movement, so this is the kudu leg, right? Now watch this one. So if you look at these joints, so we are adapting this to make a bison leg, but it didn't work. Because what we realized is that the joints are actually not the same. The kudu joint and the bison joints are not the same. So here, the kudu has a joint, it's a little bit up the knee. And for the bison, because the bison has a lot of hair, we couldn't make the joint up here. So we had to drop the joint down so that the hair sits on the side and that you can see the movement. So this is a bison leg. So these are all prototypes here we are trying. So here is a final piece. So now this is the actual leg of a bison with accurate joints, with everything correct. So if you pay attention to the movement, it's exactly the movement of the bison. So if I'm moving through the space, okay, thank you. So before I pass over to Siphokazi and Luyanda, we're going to demonstrate something. So what I was saying about an object, if you are seeing an object like this, or it's a sculpture now, there's no life on it, and there's no story at all. It's just a sculpture in an exhibition or in an art world. So once a puppeteer start to touch the head, there's a slightly movement. So what is that movement? It's already telling a story. And spectator or audience is already curious, wants to do what it's going to do next. Now it's moving. It's breathing. And once it stops breathing, it's dead. It's an object, it's a sculpture. But once it starts moving, you believe it's a puppet and you believe it's alive. Okay, thank you. Hallelujah.
Hello, my name is Luyanda Nogodlwana. I'm from Ukwanda. I'm a puppet maker, I'm a designer, I'm a researcher at Yatsiba Lab. As my fellow brother was saying, yeah, we have to research first before we build a puppet, you know. Then there is like there I have legs that I would like to show you. you know, how they work, you know. Then when we build a puppet, you have to first come with a story, you know. Then once you know the story, you know what animals that you need or human characters that you need on the story. That's when we have to visit the animals, you know, and make sure that we observe everything, you know. Then once you know the characters, then that's when we have to decide which material are we using to build this puppet that will allow you to get the movement that you want, you know. Then I will show you the legs that I have. These legs for the Velvet Monkey, but it's a project that we're busy working on now. It will be performed next year. I'll show you the movement.
Igama lami Siphokazi Mpofu. I'm one of Ukwanda. So for me, I was just gonna echoing of what Sipho and Luya was saying. When we are designing the puppets, the process, as Sipho and Luya was saying, we sometimes go and do the research. And when we are doing the research, we know exactly what we wanna build. Sometimes where the channeling of breathing needs to be for the animal, and what exactly this animal needs to do. So we only, most of the time, we always go for like 3 or 4 things that the puppet needs to do. Joints are very important because they also articulate the life, the movement, the breathing, all these things. So in front of me, there's a cheetah, which is we designed and built for the Heads project. And for the Heads project, we went to Cornell's Cup encounter to spend some time. We saw the lion, the cheetah, the zebra, many of them. So Niza told us that like we need to think about the stampede on the Heads project. So the challenge was that we're also working with the partners around the world. So we were the brain of the project because now we have to think about the joint where like the breathing is gonna show from the animals, because the most important thing is that the language of the puppetry is breathing. So if you are not breathing, you are doing nothing. you cannot make the spectators understand what is going on. As you see in this small sheet here, if you can notice the belly, so the breathing, so the cheetah was breathing here, and then the tail. As I was saying, we're working with like so many partners in this project. So we're so happy to see the builders in Morocco have so many animals, because we were so nervous that are we going to achieve this whole thing of building the prototypes in South Africa and then send the how-to documents in the partners? Yes, we did that. And when we get to these places, they glued the joint. So we had to, every time we arrive, each and every city, Kinshasa didn't build the puppets. Nigeria, they did build the puppets. Senegal, they did build the puppets. Their puppets were much better. But when we get to these places, they glued the joint. So when we're testing the puppets, we're like, okay, there's a lot to do here. So we have to cut the legs and redo the joint. When we get to Morocco, there were so many puppets, and we were so happy because they took pictures, they show us, and they took just one clip for us to see the functioning of the puppet, and we're so happy. But when we get there in Morocco to start teaching and working, most of the puppets were not functioning. And the first thing Basil said to me, said, you cannot be happy when you see the puppets, like a group of puppets in the image, and then you are excited. You cannot do that, Siphokazi. You've been puppeteering for years. What I need to see is the movement. Those were sculptures. I remember when we were building the crow, here for Berrydale. And then I sent him the pictures. And then he said to me, it's beautiful, but it doesn't make any sense for me. Can you please take the video so I can see the joint? But in my mind, when we were building the heads, because like it was work, we were under pressure, you're doing the research, you are building, you need to make sure this joint is working so you can send the how to document in Denmark and then when we get to Morocco, I was like, Basil was not harsh on me. He was right, because now we get to Morocco and they build plus minus 400 puppet. But then now we need to work on these puppet, the joints. We're not working. To go back to the joint, you will notice that Sipho have the leg with the hinge. And then on the other side, the cardboard leg have the webbing. The other challenge that we came across with the webbing when we're doing the animals for the head, the webbing was starting to shift because we were using the contact glue to put on the webbing. So the webbing was moving a bit, and then we said, how about for big animals like elephant, now we are building the bison, how about we use the hinge instead of the webbing, which is, it works nicely. And you will notice we have the rubber on the leg, which is, it helps for the tension. You will notice we have the string, which is when Sipho is holding the lever, which is the broom handle on top. When he holds that, that's when like the string pulling all these joints. So yeah, that's the process. The reason of having the cardboard and the wood, we always make mistakes. So you will make a mistakes on the piece of cardboard and then you can quickly change. But then sometimes working with the partners, for instance, now for the kudu, when Luyanda was saying it's very interesting to see the bison, one side is, oh, I must use the right word. I remember we're having a meeting with people from, people from New York, and they were saying, the word skinning, how about you use the dressing? So one side, we dress the one side, and then one side is open. Why is that? It's because we are working with partners again. Now and then, they will write emails asking all the questions, we'll take pictures, we'll send them, even if there's how to document. Now and then we'll have to do the video call. So one will ask, how long is your Excel at the back? Did you use the R clips, or all these questions. That's the reason when you go downstairs and then you will see the anatomy on the other side, but then the other side is dressed. That's the reason of keeping that side up until the New York start to build. And then once they start to build, maybe they have like 2 or 3 buffaloes. That's when we can start to fully dress our bison. So yeah, just to echo on Donna, as Ukwanda started as the puppeteers in Berrydale, from puppeteers to be the mentors slash teachers of Berrydale. It's quite a journey because as she was saying, we're so young. Yes, we're very young and the boys were so naughty. But now
I was
we,
young also.
yeah, and Premish was young. But now, like, we're teaching them and we're training them, and we are not fast. We want them to explore, not to use exactly what Ukwanda is using. I'm happy to hear Donna saying the joint that Herman built. It's something else that she never seen. It gives me goosebumps, meaning there's a growth, and what we are doing with Berrydale is working. And this coming week, we'll be having the design workshop again with them. I believe maybe this workshop is going to be the last one, if now like they are pros, just like us. Yeah, that's what I can say about Ukwanda. I think the most important thing also is that people, they think it's like one will come to you, can you please build a puppet for me? It's May, and then one will say, I need it in mid-June. They don't know the process that we go through in order for us to finish the actual animal. So it's a process. I remember Luyanda also mentioned the tinkering. Sipho, myself, and Luya, we were building a red fin fish. And then we didn't know what to do, and it was not working. I said to them, you know what, let's call it a day. Go use your brain, and then we'll come back. We'll think what we can do for this redfin to work. And it was for Berrydale, and it was not working up until we came up with an idea of using the nylock roll. And then at the end, it was working because we went home, we think, we came back, we tried, and then we look at it, and then I'm not sure I think we called Adrian Kohler, which is he's our mentor. He always come in for the joint. It's the same for that leopard that we built, and it didn't work. He did come in, and then he said, I'm worried about this, and it did not work. Thank you.
Sorry, Premise.
Okay.
Can you just play one video
We're going
before?
to play
you-
one video. I just want to say the name was Steve Warner, the late Steve Warner. So, can we hit the lights and maybe shut some of the light out so that we can? Thank you. We'll just stay here if that's okay. Do you want to just explain before we play it? Do you just want to say where you are in the world?
There's a reason to play this video because we believe you all saw the video downstairs. But then there's a reason for playing specifically this one. We just want to share the challenges and the tears about arriving here at the Arctic. This is the Arctic. Oh, sorry. This is the Norway in the glacier. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, before we play the video, because this place is really, really up in the mountain, so there was no transport going there. So we had to carry the puppets on our shoulders. It was a 4-hour walk up to the mountain. So it was actually a hiking. We got there. When we were about to shoot, a storm came and we couldn't film that day. We had to run down and leave the puppets in the mountain because the rivers that we had crossed were getting full. So a lot of damage on the joints had happened and a lot of stuff just happened. We just want to show the video before anything. Thank you.
watching you demonstrate with the bison legs, you know, and you were walking as the bison, and it just got me thinking this sort of symbiosis between you guys are puppeteers and the puppets themselves. And I was just wondering if you could just speak a little bit about what that's like, you know, because you become the animal as you walk with the animal. Does that change you? And are you drawn to particular animals? Are there particular puppeteers who are drawn to walking with and as particular animals? That was my first question. Actually, that was also my second question. It's good. Thank you.
It does change you as a puppeteer. For instance, it's all on a breath. I'll say it's all on the breath. For instance, the bison puppeteer takes 3 puppeteers. So for those 3 puppeteers, for the bison to work like a bison, as those 3 puppeteers, you have to think as one. You have to move as one. You have to be like in one state. Because if I'm thinking of my own stuff and Luya is thinking of his own stuff and Siphokazi's brain is somewhere else, it's never gonna function like a bison. So you have to be one. So what we do before we actually jump inside a puppet is that as the 3 puppeteers, we stand like this, and we stand and we hold shoulder to shoulder, and we actually breathe together. So we actually breathe together like this, and there's one puppeteer in front of me, and by doing this, we are syncing the breath of the 3 of us, so that when we are ready to move, because what happens, back puppeteer is called an hinge puppeteer, is an engine of the puppet, and the puppeteer in the middle is called the heart, is responsible of the breath of the puppeteer. The puppeteer that's doing the head in front, it's called the brain. It's called he or she is the brain of the puppet. So she or he is able to tell us, now we are about to move. So as we are breathing like this, and the brain feels like you are ready now to move, the brain is going to give an impulse breath. And impulse breath is something like, and then the back drops, and then Luya as the engine will push me, and now we are all going forward as one. We are all one. So it's all in breath. If I'm not sure if I answered you well, but thank you.
And Sipho, what about the kinds of puppets, animal puppets? Do people gravitate to the elephant, the big one, or which puppets do people like to kind of get involved with?
Yeah, for me, I think it's the giant puppet kabani, the elephant. I think so. Yeah, because if maybe I'm here, I'm a one handler. I'm on my own. But if there's 3 of us in I think I prefer big animals than small animals. For me, I think yeah.
The giant animals are much better, you know, because of the weight of the puppet, you know. Because if you are inside the giant puppet, you carry the weight with your backpack, you know, than carrying the weight with the hands. You know, it's much better when the weight is on your body, you know, than carrying from the hands. You know.
Yeah. If anyone wants to carry an elephant, there's one downstairs.
You mentioned, you know, going to these different places with the herds, right? And you know, and part of what you were doing was also training, right? You were involved in training people to be puppeteers and to work with the animals. And you mentioned now, you know, the kind of perhaps challenge of you know, getting there and the joints are not, you know, joined. But can you say perhaps a little bit about the methods of training and also perhaps the challenges, because right, you get to DRC, language might be a barrier. You get to, you know, Morocco, language there might also be a barrier, and the ways in which you navigated and through those barriers in the trainings, which of course I know training is very important for you, which of course is what you do at Berrydale as well. And so as the mode, as something that is important in what you do, how do you kind of navigate that, particularly with this project that took you in so many different places with the different languages, etc.?
When we get to Kinshasa, they were so excited to be with us in the room. But the challenge was for us to communicate with the participant, which is the training that we're doing, we arrived each and every city, 3 days of training. So day one, that's when we are teaching the basic of puppetry, which is you just have a piece of paper. That piece of paper you need to bring it to life. It needs to breathe, which is, day one was always a challenge because people, I don't know what was happening to people's mind, but then sometimes I can assess and then I can see people, they're like, okay, what are we doing here? Where are the puppets? Because people, they were always like expecting to see puppets day one, which is, it doesn't work like that. You need to train. Even for me, as a professional puppeteer, I started in that piece of brown paper. And I think even for me, I couldn't understand, but somehow I understand them, the way they were looking at us. So we'll arrive, did the basic training of puppetry, the principles, the breathing, most importantly. And day two, that's when we were doing what Sipho and Luya was doing, the syncing together and the gates. But the thing was that we've noticed when we're having the translators sometimes, when I'm saying this person is not translating what I'm saying. That was the challenge, especially in Kinshasa. But they were so amazing. There was something special about young people in Kinshasa wanted to be the puppeteers so bad, which is there's no one who can be a puppeteer after 3 days. What we're doing, we were teaching the breathing, the gait, the galloping of these animals, because the galloping was very important because we're doing the stampede. So animals needs to run. The other challenge was that we're so nervous when we're about to go to Manchester. We're so scared of the accent. And then they might not understand Siphokazi from South Africa. But I was so amazed how like they understand us. And again, I don't think puppetry needs the language, right? That's the other thing. We don't need language. So once you showed puppeteers, this is what you need to do, they can understand. What else was saying? I think maybe Sipho or Luya we can add, in case I forget some of Luanda's question.
I think for me as the puppet doctor, the most challenging part was the material. The material that we are using to build the puppets, like the glue, the webbing, then it was tough, in some places we couldn't manage to get the material, And the glue that they were using there, sometimes it will last only 2 days, On the third day, then the puppet is broken. Then I was fixing puppets every day, and it was hectic, but we made it.
The other challenges that we came across is if people love puppets, so each and every city will ask volunteers from the community, and people come out in numbers. Like there's 200 people, and we only wanted 100 people. Now we have to deal with telling some of the people we can't take all of you. And yeah, stuff like that. And the other challenge that we had is having old people. I'm not saying old people can't manipulate puppets. I'm not saying old people can't okay. So in Manchester, we had the really old like city participants, and they all wanted to be puppeteers. They all wanted in the puppeteer. Some you could tell that she's not going to be able to lift these puppets, or he's not going to be able to lift this puppet, but they just, so we have a training was before the performance, so old people will act like I'm fresh. He doesn't want to show that he's old and he's sitting down. So they will do all of this stuff in the training. I'm like, oh, he really wants to be in a puppet, that one. So those are some of the challenges that we had, but overall it was a great journey. We had a good
just to add a quick one, as you see that like there's a lever there that broomstick on top. So what happened was that was the challenge of the joint. That's the other thing that we came back with when we were coming from the heads. So the puppeteers, you need to put your wrist rest on the top of the leg, and then you control your lever. So the problem that we're facing is that I'm sorry, I'll have to say it, the dancers. The dancers, they don't want to use their wrists. So we are working with them. And then it's very important for the joint of the knees. And then they were saying it's so hard for them to control the liver, which is, yes, maybe some of the puppets were heavy, but then it was the challenge that like we have to kind of like make the voice not to shout, but then tell them, please use the liver. Because all those people, they took their time, their energy to be part of the climate crisis that we are facing as the world. But now you are here, you're excited to do this, but then you don't want to use the joint, which is, it's time that like we spend weeks and weeks for this joint to work. But then you're telling us, I cannot do it. If you don't want to do it, just do the velvet monkeys, because velvet monkeys didn't have the joint.
Yeah, dancers didn't want to lift like heavy puppets. In Venice, we ended up performing ourselves because the city participants were all dancers, and they said we cannot, our wrists and stuff. They said a lot of stuff about wrists, and they said yes, we do not want to perform, so we ended up jumping on the puppets and performing ourselves. So yeah, weight challenges.
So the dancers amongst us, know the importance of the rest.
Thanks so much, Mr. I mean, thank you so much, guys, for the presentation and also for your work. I think this, your work, what you're talking about, is sort of like an image in my imagination of concrete politics, like this whole idea of movement. That without movement there is no life, and it brings something stuck to my mind around, could a lifeless puppet be an image of South Africa or the world as we know it now, in two ways. One, in that there's possibility there, right, in the sense that you said once the joints aren't moving properly, it's dead, but you can always intervene to fix the joints, right? And so this whole idea that it's not necessarily despair, there is possibility for us to be able to fix the joints, right? And I think that's an image that for me is very powerful with your work. But also I think about movement building, the whole idea of building movements. I mean, we thought about the victory of the Tafelberg School recently, right? That movements are constituted by a lot of parts. All right, and if I think about my own experience in the Fees Must Fall movement, there were people who had never historically stood in front of crowds and articulated positions. That's not their talent, but these people were able to mobilize resources. Some people were able to be on social media and get the message out. Some people were able to convince people one-on-one. Some people were able to do different things, but people see the big thing at the end and they don't see what gives it life. And I think there's something about that there. And then the final part, I want to ask a question about the translocation, the moving of the actual puppets. And I think Luyanda has anticipated me, and you guys have also anticipated this question. But I hear you say that Siphokazi, the whole idea that it's not a language. It doesn't need a language. But do you think perhaps it is a language of its own? Right, the whole process of making a puppetry itself, does it have this sort of lexicon that could help us understand and appreciate our own world? And then I want to ask a question.
Last one.
Sorry for being man of the match. Never again. I want to ask the ethics of puppeteering. Right, the whole idea between the relationship between the puppet and the puppeteer. If we think about state capture in South Africa, Donald Trump in America, this whole idea of being a puppet is a negative image of controlling someone for your own nefarious ends. So what are the sort of ethics? Because what I'm receiving from you is something completely different. So what are the sort of ethics that go through your process that sort of could help us think differently about steering the world in a different direction? Thank you very much.
I'm interested in how you guys have named yourselves. Why Net for Pret, right? The fun there. What does that really do for your work? And then also Ukwanda, Nonileni Yandisayo, you know. And then also I think I have a question for Donna. How do these young people really what's the reception from them? How do they respond to this? And I'm asking this because if you look at the South African like history of its curriculum from OBE to CAPS, I think that the work of this sort of nature of the hand almost became lost in the process. Like with CAPS, we don't really hear anything about woodwork. In fact, I remember once a joke was made about Malema's marks on woodwork that he got F, you know. And it sounds like the government has given an F on woodwork totally. Um, so I just want to hear your views, right? Would it be perhaps maybe necessary for us to actually reintroduce this type of work? And then also on Ukwanda, I want to kind of hear more on how do you engage really climate change education, climate change awareness, right, in your work?
That I was looking at the video about the Arctic caps, and I think it's a theme that I'm curious about in all your work. Can you reflect a little bit about how there's a centrality of breathing, there's the movement and the joint, and then there's sound and the sonic. And in that scene, there's this rousing music that's very cinematic. And I was wondering, listening to your description of the storm and the kind of outside space, how, I guess, what does an attentiveness to sound in that mix of performance mean? How do you approach sound? Because I mean, there's the famous example of Premesh and the elephant, and that's a very powerful example of what is possible. That I would just wanted to ask you to reflect a little bit on the many ways in which sound could and does help to bring about the magic and engagement that is the work of Ukwanda.
My question is kind of a reflection on the idea of joints, and I was thinking of the idea of bipedalism, the capacity that have to actually stand on their 2 feet, and that actually led to our separation between the human and the animal. And my question rather is, what do you think the work of puppetry is in rejoining the human to the animal, particularly thinking on the process of the herd and the climate crisis in which it was speaking to?
It's fascinating to me, your process, or Kwanda's process, and Net for Pret's process is to work with animals that have particular ways of being in their environment. As Siphokazi used to say, you're not making Disney animals, right? But then you always perform them in a context that's foreign to them, right? I mean, you're not performing in Addo, you're performing the elephant in the city, for example. So there's something about that liminality between those two, that transition, that threshold between the real in which we live and the real in which they live, right? So, and this makes me think, so I'm only allowed one question, so it's a complex question, sorry guys. This makes me think of that phrase that people would often say, oh, so-and-so is just a puppet, yeah? Just a puppet. They're not really the one making the decisions. It's actually this person or something. But your work opens that up into a different direction, right? Because, and this is something that I was thinking since I did an interview with Mongin Tombeni 2016 at the launch of the flagship. When he corrected one of the journalists who was asking the question, he said, no, kinetic object isn't the puppet. He said the kinetic object is the relationship between the human and the puppet, right? And there's something about how the puppet doesn't just change how your work doesn't just change how we think of the animal, but how we think of the human as such. So I was wondering if you guys could play with that a little bit.
You were saying at the beginning, or towards the beginning, that a joint is what allows movement to happen, and that movement creates life. So a joint behaves in a way organically. And here is my question, or my observation transformed into a question, because I've been looking a lot to your puppets. As you know, I've been down there for a lot. Yeah, I've been a lot there. And I was thinking of the relation of joint and equilibrium, in the sense that I see a lot of compensation of the movement of joints, both in your puppets and in our bodies. Although it's different, because in the puppets, they're all hanging, and our bodies are standing most of the joint. But in both cases, there's a lot of compensation. One joint moves, and many others have to move, and that's why your puppets are so complex. There's not just a single joint, and what I see now when you were showing is that a joint moved upwards, all the others had to move downwards, and so I think that now trying to think as a joint, as a space of liminality, something that is connecting parts, but it's connecting parts in such a way that when one parts need to go somewhere, the others need to go somewhere else. And I was wondering, I mean, how, if you think about that kind of compensatory movement to keep a sort of general equilibrium that in our cases, I mean, literal cases has to do with gravity, but I'm thinking it in a broader way.
I have one question, and that is thinking particularly about this movement and what happens when you step into that puppet role. And then also I'm curious about what happens when you step out of that, when you step out of the puppet. And I'm curious to know if you find yourself moving in particular ways in everyday life outside of the puppet that's informed by that puppet. And that could be taken literally or also kind of metaphorically in terms of how you move through or think through the world.
The name Net for Pret, which is just for fun in English. So Net for Pret was established 25 years ago. And the thinking behind Net for Pret is that children grow up so quickly. Childhood is not that long. So we wanted to create a space where a child will still be a child and can enjoy childhood. Even if you're 25, come and play, because play is powerful, even for us as adults. So that's where the name comes from. Net for Pret, or just for fun. And with play comes fun, of course. And then how do young people relate to puppets and working with the hands and so on? So many of these youngsters has been with us from the ages of 4. So there's only one crash in Berrydale. So what we do in our aftercare program, we act like a bridge to actually expose these young children to materials they would normally have in the ECD class, your crayons, your colors, your paints and so on, but we also put puppetry into there. So we first start with normal hand puppets, and later on we'll create like puppets with newspaper or the brown paper. So they have that knowledge from an early age, really. So if you look at the puppeteer now, who's now 18, 19, then I would have known that puppeteer from the age of 4 or 5. And they've been in shows. They've seen how the puppets are being made. I remember when you guys brought the giraffe. Remember there was a young child who was actually walking up to the giraffe and starting to touch the cheek of the giraffe. And that child believed that the giraffe was alive because that child has been exposed to performances and puppets from an early age. So that's how the young people relate. And they see the whole process from designing up to where the puppet is actually performing.
The name Ukwanda. Ukwanda kwaliwa ngumthakathi. I'm joking. So the name Ukwanda, we said, let's be Ukwanda so we can expand. At that time, we didn't know that today we will be this Ukwanda. Because we came across so many challenges before CHR. I think we are the blessed artists, I must say that. So the name Ukwanda means to expand. We wanted to change this name back then, but now we are not changing our name because now the puppets are growing every day. And Ukwanda, we've been traveling, which is something that we never know that can happen for ourselves. Practicing a medium that in South Africa, people will call you, oh, the dolls. When's the abano dolly? This is what we are doing. We are just playing with dolls. And then you sometimes like, no, these are not dolls. We are telling stories, but then these are dolls. I remember when we were performing in one of the primary schools. At that time, I was performing my pet puppet, and then the young people were saying they are not going to listen to the dolls, and then they start throwing stones at us, and then we didn't perform in that school. So I think that's the name Ukwanda means to expand, and yes, Ukwanda I think Ukwanda to the world, which is we're going far. Phambili we go. Someone asked about climate change in our work. You know, there's this power about puppetry. So we build the heads, even if it's not the heads. We are in Pret. We have 2 giant puppets on the street. Someone doesn't know what is happening, what is going on. They will see the giant puppet. They will start to follow without us saying anything to them. There's no a poster or someone is in front of this puppet is saying we are doing this. But the power of puppetry will engage people. People will come together and they will chat about what they see in front of them. So for Nizar to say, let's build these 600 plus animals for climate crisis, the migration of the animals from Africa to Arctic Circle, because they are looking for better life. They need greener pastures, these animals. But then it is bigger than that. It's the migration, it's the moving of people. But then instead, we were using animals, which is animals will arrive in Ekwebecha. People will start chasing us. And then there will be people like, please don't touch. And as puppeteers, someone was asking about like us being puppeteers. As puppeteers, we train people, please, if you're a zebra, you must stay as zebra. Even if like your family is here to support you, you need to keep that zebra within you. And when we are building the animals from Ukwanda from the beginning, we don't want audience to pet our animals, especially for the heads animals. Yes, we were forgiving people because we're telling them like these are wild animals and they are rushing to pass. They're not supposed to be at the mall, but then in Manchester, we get inside the mall, we get inside the shops because people, like the owners of the shop, they did allow us because they know the problem that we are facing. And the feedback that we're getting, someone was saying to me, they came to me, I was doing the interview, and then she was crying, saying to me, thank you for speaking for these animals. They cannot speak, and thank you for speaking for other people that they cannot speak for themselves. So I think that's the power and the magic of puppetry. People will listen. Even if the puppet is on stage, it's breathing, but then there's a stillness. Someone will see something on that puppet. So I think the power of the puppetry do these things. I'll try the sound. I remember when we were building the elephant, and then Simon Kohler came in that process. It was CHR, Ukwanda, and after the tour. So we were talking about like giving the actual sound of the elephant, because when elephants are doing sounds, they're doing sounds to communicate with the animal, with the elephant that is in the CBD, but then one is here. Elephant can stampede, but then the elephant in town can feel that vibration, and then that elephant can understand that Siphokazi needs help in Woodstock. So it's the way that they communicate. So Simon used the vuvuzela. The vuvuzela was for trumpeting. Again, the vuvuzela was for rumbling. So we spent like weeks and weeks of to create sound. And then the sound behind the the heads videos, sometimes I was in the room when Niza was saying to the editor, please don't use this sound. It's not working for me. Niza is Niza. If he's not happy, he's not. It's up to you how you take it. Yeah. So, especially for this one behind us, the reason for us to go to the glacier was that we were saying one day that glacier, because of the climate crisis, is not gonna be there. As you see, the ice is melting and it's not gonna come back. It is melting. It's 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 going out. It's going off whatsoever. That's why as humans, we need to take care of the world. I think that's what I took out of the heads when I'm going to these cities and then see the use of plastics and then like see so many things. And then when I came back, that's when I started to change and to say, okay, I think it needs to start with us, because we always say we are doing the awareness of this. For elephants, we built them because it was the awareness of the poaching. For the heads, it was the awareness of the climate crisis. There's so many awarenesses that we've been doing with Berrydale. So I think my colleagues can add.
Okay, to add to what Spock is saying, if you notice, most of our puppets are made out of a cane and wood. This puppet is made of a cane. This is the gelatong wood. It's from Malaysia. That is why Spock is saying it's very important, to raise awareness, because I remember last time when we were looking for the cane, they said, no, the cane is finished. They no longer have a cane, because it doesn't grow. No one is taking care, of the cane anymore. People, they don't want to grow the cane. Everyone want to work soft, smarter, That is why we're raising awareness, because once we lose the material, there will be end of these beautiful puppets. That is why we need to take care of this material,
To add on what Siphokazi said about power, someone asked why puppets, and Siphokazi said because they have power. So one way to explain that is one word for that is volume. We believe that puppets has higher volume than any other thing. So for example, is in Manchester, we went to one of the cities, and I think there were 100 of us walking to that city, preparing for an event later, and people were just looking at us over the windows. No one came out. It was raining on that day. Then we went to a spot where we kept the puppets. We took out the puppets. So the performance in that city, it was not announced. Nobody knows that we're coming. So we walked there as a group, I think 100 of us, people looking at us through the windows, and we went to the space, we took out the puppets, and we started stamping the streets of Manchester, and hundreds of people came out. All of those were by the windows. They quickly went outside the doors, and they came out to join the march with the puppets. So volume. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's also important to raise the point about literacy and what these projects, particularly in Berrydale, has meant for literacy. So, I mean, the figure we now bandy about is there are large numbers of young people in Berrydale who have entered higher education through this long process of 18 years that we've been involved in this undertaking with Net for Pret. But it does seem to me that we're not thinking carefully about how to deal with questions of literacy. As I said in the workshop the other day, when South Africa came out 57 out of 57 countries in all official languages as the worst literacy levels for people 8 to 12 reading for meaning. So the question here is, we have staggering statistics of illiteracy taking hold. It's the only country post independence, democracy, that didn't undertake a literacy program. So if you take Cuba, Nicaragua, all of these places that went through a kind of post-colonial revolution of one form or the other, the first thing they did was to engage in a literacy campaign. I remember reading on Nicaragua, the literacy levels before the revolution was 14%. Immediately after that, I mean, they went on a massive campaign to increase that to 90%. So this is also another way to think about how one deals with questions of literacy. And I think what's happened in Berrydale is such a profound example of what it means to think again about what education could do. So someone was asking about, what significance, this has for rethinking education. And I think it was about the question of what the hand does. And I will say that, for this center would not have undertaken the kinds of research projects that it has if it hadn't been through an engagement with Ukwanda and Net for Pret. I think there's something about learning to learn that is an ethical kind of an injunction now that I think has benefited the center in all sorts of ways. So the way in which we think about movement and thought, the reconstitution of the human, as Moritz has put it, all of those have been in a conversation with a moving object or the kinetic object in one form or the other.
On the heads, on the toe. So every time before we let the puppeteers into the puppets, there's a thing called the gait. It's how the leg of the puppet move. So this is how we practice the thing. If one of you can come forward. So what happens is that most of the time, puppeteers wouldn't get the gait right. They wanted to move the legs at the same time, whereas it should be separate one leg at a time. So what helped us in that is the practicing of the gait. So from the breath.
Which animal?
Elephant. It's the elephant. Okay. So it's one. So watch what the legs are doing. So my right is one, and her left is two, and my left is three, and her right is four.
The elephant
So
is kicking.
it's one.
Two.
No, let's do that. Let's not do the elephant. Let's do the other one. Okay. It's
Okay.
1,
Two.
3,
Whoa.
1,
Two.
3,
Four.
1,
Two.
3.
Four.
So we spend hours and hours doing one more time. We spend hours and hours doing this practice just to get the gauge right. So this is the mistake they are doing. So okay. 1,
Two.
3,
Four.
1, 3. Are you paying attention to what the legs are doing? They're now kicking each other. They're supposed to be crisscrossing. So we spend a lot of time doing this practice. It's called the gait.
I mean, that's too much because the humanities faculty can't even dance. So, to ask them to move in that manner.
So when we are stringing each part of the body of the puppet, if the knee needs to point forward, and then the ankle needs to also point, those rubbers that we are using and the string will be halfway because I know the string needs to only work for the ankle, and I know the string that needs to pull the knee, so we can balance that movement, which part is going where and then why. So the stringing help us a lot. It's simple, it's the rubber tendon and the string. So most of the time we're using that for our joints. To the question, how does it take for us to research? Sometimes we don't go to these places for animals. Sometimes you can spend time in your screen studying the movement. Yeah, that's what we're doing. For instance, for the heads, we only went to Cornell Scope, but then for other animals, we couldn't go to Sanbona or Ado Elephant, where we once went to for the elephants. So we spend a week of the research before we start the design process, because we need to know things that are very important, which is the joint and the breathing channel. So we'll spend time doing the research for that. For humans, it's much better. We just look at ourselves. I can look my elbow, so for humans, we're using our bodies. But then because for the animals are complicated, that's why you spend a week. But then for human, we can start designing while you are busy researching. And the process of designing, it's a week of research, and then the next week is the design. And from the design, we are building the prototype. And from prototype, that's when we are building the actual animal. So it can take us a month or two. The bison took us May, June. It took us 2 months. And then we thought it was going to be just 1 month. But then we came across so many problems, the weight, and we had to work with the new material, which is the hyacinth for the skin. Oh, yeah. For the dressing. Yeah. So we had to work with the new material, which is hyacinth is not that good. Your skin can be itchy. So we found ways on how to make hyacinth to be workable. So we had to soak it on the cold glue, do some tests, use the earth dye, so many stuff that we were trying. So that's the process. And Malia, you were saying, how does it feel?
When you leave the puppet.
Sure. For me,
You walk like an elephant.
no. The thing is about me as a puppeteer. I don't want to speak for other puppeteers. The minute I'm getting inside, for instance, on the heads, I was doing the kudu most of the time. The minute I touch the puppet, I think that's why I was calling these puppet animals. So the interviewer will say to me, you kept on saying these are animals. I was saying that because at the end of the day, I was giving life to an object. So I will get into a kudu. I'm not talking with anyone, and I'm telling my fellow puppeteers, let's breathe. That's the discipline first of all. So the minute I get inside the puppet, I completely forget about myself. My focus is that I need to bring life to this. Not that I want to make it perfect. And when you are mastering that, it just comes out naturally for me. So when I'm coming out, it's always hard for me because I'm tired, I'm shaking, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm going back to Siphokazi. Then I will remember myself. Someone was saying it's like psychic or something. When I was answering this question, yeah. But then I will walk as Siphokazi, but then my body, like pain there and there, the shaking of the wrist, because I'm always doing manipulating the head. So I will shake for like 2 minutes. So yeah, I come out as Siphokazi, but then when I'm inside, I completely forget about myself because I'm breathing and I want to bring life to a kudu so you can see a kudu. So yeah.
You know, there's a wonderful moment. We had a visit with Pret, who brought a group down for their preparation of this year's play. And Kurt Campbell did a lecture on rock art, because he's working on a book on rock art as an art object, rather than one mediated through anthropology or archaeology or any of the other disciplines. And there's something resonant about what you do with the puppet and what you find in the kind of articulations and the readings of rock art. And Kurt has written a wonderful paper about Kachan's dream that was performed in Barrydale one year. 2016, I think, somewhere around there. You were the lead actor in that. Yeah. So I'm going to let you have the last word, Donna, and maybe if you could, Nosipo's question about what it means to enter and exit the animal form. And if you could say a little bit about Reconciliation Day, and maybe even if you have the authority to let us in on the secret of this year's production, you could treat this as your first preview and press conference.
Stepping into the puppet and getting out of the puppet. So I was one of the first female puppeteers in Barrydale. And it was something unknown to the community. So they were used to me in a certain way, in a certain position. So the puppet really transformed me, and I could lose that persona of Donna, the community worker, and become like the rhino, like the tortoise. So yes, it is something profound that is happening to you, and it also where we live. There's one private game reserve that's outside of town, but we've never seen live animals. Although we're living next to the resort, it's too expensive for us to exit and see live animals. So when you go and you observe the animals and you see a rhino for the first time, immediately you're so captured that there's no other way that you're bringing everything back and putting it into that puppet. So I was playing a rhino puppet, not playing, performing a rhino puppet. And this rhino puppet's horn was being cut off. And it was so traumatic for me as the puppeteer that the next day I said, no, I don't want to do this anymore because I've experienced some loss in my own life. So, and I said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. This is too much because you can see how the horn is being cut off, everything. But then after having a good night's rest, and of course, I always say there's magic in Berrydale, in the mountains, in the wind. So the next day, I received my strength back and I could get into the puppet and perform it. And that is one of the performances that would always stay with me. And then also, I would say that the project really means a lot to my community because if I look at all the young people, and I've been working at Pret now for 19 years, so I've seen children growing up before my eyes, and I've seen them changing their lives and transforming into artists, into designers. We over the years we've had over 70 youngsters from Berrydale entering university and colleges over the years, and it has never happened before. So we've got now teachers who's coming back and giving back to the community. We've got nurses, we've got lawyers. So we're really blessed to have this partnership that is really allowing us to expand and grow in getting into spaces where we normally wouldn't have access to. And then also this year's story. So it was quite a challenge because the puppet team decided that they want to do the big five, and I decided no, we must do the ocean. So how can you bring land and ocean together? So then we said, okay, so we've got the big five of the land. So where is the big five of the ocean? So now we're going to bring the two together, and the title is called When Water Remembers. And also, there will be a big moment where the big five is getting kidnapped, and they are being transported away over the ocean. And then they have to be found somehow. So that's why we're also putting in around the world in 80 minutes. So, of course, maybe we want to see a leopard on the wall of China, maybe a lion at the pyramids. So, in the pursuit of finding these big five, we're going to visit like different destinations, and the animals in the ocean is going to help us to find the big five.
That's really wonderful, and so wonderful that you could share that with us and with Winter School. I know that there's a large amount of work waiting for you downstairs as well. But if any of you want to go for a walkabout during the period of Winter School, I'm sure Ukwanda would be happy to show you around. And I know that this weekend, I think the rest of the youth leaders team is coming down as well. So there'll be lots of people around in the lab. Please feel free to wander about and have a look at this. So thank you very, very much for a beautiful session.